This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, our call is being recorded. Welcome everyone to the EDIC meeting of May 16th, 2023. First order of business, to approve our April meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to peruse the April meeting minutes? Cassie and David?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody interested in a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of the April meeting.
Thanks. In a second.
Second.
Okay, Chris has a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the April meeting minutes?
Aye.
So, very good. All right, that's all 5 of us. Thank you, everyone. We don't have anybody here for public speak that isn't on our agenda because I have listed Cassie as someone who will be leading a portion or participating meaningfully in a portion of our agenda. I don't know that you'll be leading it. Who knows? And Jamie Paquette is here as well as a representative from the Energy Advisory Committee. I will add that I got a message this afternoon from Councilor Riley saying that Easthampton Media is interested in doing a short series of mini documentaries about the work of existing city committees. So I will keep my eyes peeled for a message about that from Easthampton Media. And then we can figure out how to be rock stars. Are there any other things you would want to share now that are not on the agenda in public speak time? No? Okay, great. All right. Welcome, Jeff Bagg. It's been a bit. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming. Updates from our planning department. We already know that the Envision Main Street meeting number 2 is coming up in early June. Is it true, Jeff, that is for original invitees, or is that a wider audience able to participate in that?
That would be a wider audience.
Cool.
Want to cast the big net for that. We should be putting out like a press release sometime this week.
Cool.
So that we, usually that helps get a Gazette article out there, and the consultants are going to be bringing back kind of like the next step of the process, which will hopefully be some concept plans based on what they heard at the first meeting. So it's really probably like a 3-step process. First meeting, second meeting is what's happening on June 6th. And then there'll be hopefully one more meeting with like an actual plan based on consensus and information. So yeah, that would be great if anyone can come. It's at 6 o'clock at the First Congregational Church on Main Street, which is where we held the first one, and it's June 6th.
Okay. So keep your eyes peeled for messages from City Hall about that. A Pleasant Street project to design new access to the rear of the mills. There's a meeting on May 30th at 5:30. Because we read or made accessible portions of the housing production plan, is this the task item on there that EDIC is also tagged on about parking near the mills, or is that a different thing? I'm interested in more information about this.
I think parking is going to come up as a need of the mill owners to continue their evolution. But this is kind of like the first step at some economic development support for the mill district to pick up where we left off. So I think the big windup is that the city got millions and millions. It kind of culminated in 2015. They were able to bury the utilities and build the parking behind the mills. And it's been super successful. And what we see is that the 3 entrances off Pleasant Street just weren't part of that first project. And to continue to support their growth, each of the mill owners has space available to continue to grow. So we want to make getting a car and walking and biking to the back of the mills safer for everybody. And then it just as part of this project, we're also going to be talking about sort of access from the bike path as a it's a really important part of the bike path is right there. And it's a lot of people are accessing the mills via the bike path. And then the biggest kind of vision picture is for decades, there's been a conversation about some kind of pedestrian bridge over Lower Mill Pond which would connect to Everett Street. And there's a large neighborhood like the Maple Street, Briggs Street, Clark Street. And, that whole area could be connected to the bike path and the mills via a footbridge of some sort. And so we want to make sure that that's still something that people think is valuable. And then this project it won't design the bridge, but our consultants will kind of look at the feasibility of it and determine possibly the best location for it. And then that would be like step one. Step two would be to come up with like designs for the bridge after this. And then step three would be to get some grant money to try to build it. So that it's like a 5-year look ahead on that one.
Great.
So if people, this group if anyone can attend that meeting, it would be great because it is like definitely an economic development activity.
Okay. Tom?
Jeff, you mentioned parking. Did the initial proposal for a parking garage on Pleasant Street, has that gone anywhere, or has he let that go?
There has been a discussion for one of the mill owners has a concept plan to build a parking garage still. It's still sort of out there. But even though we built all that parking in the back and Eastworks has a lot of parking in the front, to really continue to the build out of those buildings, they are all saying they need some sort of additional parking to support, because each of them has the opportunity for more housing units and then commercial activities. And then really at the back of the mills, there's still a lot of growth potential. And so this project is to try to open that up, come up with some concept plans for what would be helpful in the future. And it's really to set us up with like a vision plan for 5 or 6 years from now. What can we do with the mills?
Good.
Great. Anything else you'd like to share with the group from planning?
Not right now. There's one more item on the agenda, so I'll speak to it a little bit later.
Okay.
Great.
Well then, is there any other questions for Jeff related to city planning? Yeah, Chris.
I do. Sorry, Jeff, you cut out a little bit. What was the target area for the bridge? Was it the Everett Street area?
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, there used to be a couple. There used to be up to 3, I guess, 3 bridges. And then for a period of time, there's 2. And so what the consultant is going to do is look at the shoreline on both sides. So the Mills side and then on Everett Street side, and try to find sort of the best spot for it. And, as Tom mentioned, I think before we got on the call, there's a cemetery that runs kind of like along Everett Street. And if you were looking at Everett Street towards the mills, one of the best location that we think is on the left side, the left edge of the cemetery. There is an old right-of-way that goes down, and there used to be a footbridge right there. And that's the area that we think is the most viable. But we need like professional engineering groups to look at that with us and make sure that's like the right target area. There would be a lot of things that would have to happen after that, but that's kind of like what we would get out of this is here's like the best location, and then take steps after that.
Thanks.
Okay. Cassie Eckhoff, are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Cassie Tragert, welcome. Conservation agent. Jamie Paquette, EAC representative. Mini background, I think I gave you a minimum of background, is that we've been having some conversations about how the natural gas moratorium in Easthampton and surrounding communities could potentially affect abilities of certain businesses to move their operation here, and talking about how it affects homeowners and renters alike, and just thinking about energy, sustainability, all of these things as they exist in a city where we would like to make sure that it is still reasonable to run a business here, live here, afford to live here, etc. So I shared with all of you some materials that Cassie forwarded to me related to the climate action plan and the scope of the upcoming project with the consultant. So Cassie and or Jamie, is there a specific topic we could head down now together?
It depends on what you guys want to hear. So I can give you more of an overview of what the climate action plan is and how we're like pursuing its development. Or we can talk straight about the EAC's involvement in that and kind of oversight of that. or we can go straight to moratorium talk. So, do you have a
Okay.
preference at all?
Anybody got a preference? No? So why don't we then do a quick overview of the climate action plan and where we're headed and your role in that so far.
Yeah. Okay. So, right. So we've been trying to develop a climate action plan. There's a lot of, communities are pursuing this right now, and it's kind of a hot issue, I think, for the times right now. And the state is going a lot in that direction. And there's a lot of federal money and grants and things that are going to be coming down for trying to make these changes to help try to, reduce our carbon footprint. And it makes sense to develop a plan for how to achieve this reduction in our carbon footprint. And basically, we have been able to partner with Weston & Sampson, which is a consultant firm, to hire them to help us develop that plan. And something that's going to be informed by, a lot of reaching out to the public and trying to get their opinions on things and information on what are barriers for them to make changes to these, kind of more electrified carbon reducing actions, and then identify actions that the city could take, things that are directly under the municipal control that they can make that would be improvements in that regard. And then also trying to help businesses convert to more carbon reduction and general actions that would be supportive of this overarching goal. And the overarching goal would be to reach a carbon net zero emitting city by a certain target date that they were going to help us determine what a reasonable target date would be. So it's kind of those three sectors there of the municipal, the public, and then the business sector that we're trying to help this plan be there for. And the idea is that kind of creates a roadmap for how to achieve that goal, but also can be used to help us kind of apply for grants and things to take on those changes and help support people to that end. And so we've been working with the Energy Advisory Committee has been crucial in that they've been helping review these things. They helped review and craft the scope that we use to help kind of act as the guide and framework for Weston & Sampson. And then they've basically been there throughout the process since, in terms of we've been having these biweekly meetings with Weston & Sampson. And the first thing that we're working on is the survey, trying to create a survey that business owners and members of the public could take, try to give us more information about, what the knowledge is of certain actions that people could take are, and then what barriers are for people to take certain actions. So to reduce their carbon footprint. And then Jamie, I don't know if you have anything you want to add about how EAC has been involved. EAC has been the main committee that's been kind of looking and overseeing this project. And I'm the staff person.
Right. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. Just that, we've got a chance to talk directly with Weston & Sampson early on, and then sort of reviewing progress as it happens, and sort of helping to refine and revise, things as we, ideas come up and as we talk through it.
Yeah, and then I guess the last piece, in regards to the gas moratorium is, admittedly, I'm not super familiar with it. I know what it is. I know, partially, the impact that it has, but how it would fit into the climate action plan, I think that it could, in terms of, that has implications for the future of how the city gets its energy and uses energy. And so I think it likely would be a factor in something that the climate action plan could look at that and maybe make some suggestions of how to proceed. But I don't know in terms of what kind of influence the city has on that moratorium. I guess the legal implications and workings of that, I think I have still more to learn about that, frankly.
Yeah, we invited the state reps to join us for a conversation a couple of months ago, and I wouldn't say that was terribly illuminating, but we're not super clear about what weight we've got either as a city.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, just not having been privy to the conversation before, but from a business standpoint, are businesses feeling the pinch of that? Is it affecting existing businesses, or is it more for businesses that might consider relocating here or something along those lines?
Great question. Who wants to field it? Tom Brown, you want to take it?
Yeah, Jamie, it's primarily affecting businesses that want to locate here. The bottom line on the moratorium, and I may be oversimplifying this, but the gas companies basically said, we want a pipeline through your state. The state said no, and they said, okay, you win. No more gas hookups. So it really is the tail wagging the dog here. Even our legislators that appeared here, as Gwen mentioned, seem frustrated. There's not a lot we can do. We don't have a lot of leverage to force the gas company to allow new hookups.
Mhm.
So we're aware of two businesses. I don't know where we stand with the hot tub business, but the potential development on Northampton Street is looking at putting in propane, which I'm guessing has greatly affected their business plan, financial business plan, if you will. We even ran into some headwinds when we built the new school. We had to use propane for a short period of time because even though we had gas to the old school, we wanted to fire up, stoves and ovens and things to test them in the new school. We couldn't do it because we couldn't hook up the two schools at the same time. So it's basically, we're not willing to play ball with a pipeline through our state, and they hold all the cards with allowing new hookups.
Are the businesses where gas is like a hard requirement for them, or is it just like, well, it's cheaper and it would save us some money, but we could go full electrification, but we want to use gas instead?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if Jeff can answer. I don't know about their ability to use electric. When I look at a project the size of Tasty Top, or I look at the power that's needed to run the hot tubs, Gwen's more familiar with the hot tub company than I am.
Yeah, the hot tub company essentially said it's not possible, even if we combine all of the existing other energy sources available on that site. They were thinking of going into the former National Flooring site on 141.
Mm-hmm.
Is that 141? That's not 141. It's 10 by then.
10, yeah.
10.
So they're really struggling because they technically have a gas hookup. It's just not wide enough for the number of BTUs they need to run their hot tubs. David and Chris, you each had your hands up. Chris, you want to lead with anything?
No, Tom covered it.
Okay, David.
I was just going to say, there was the time when, with Casara had to manipulate the multiple pipelines, multiple hookups from the different buildings in order to get together to have enough BTUs for their restaurant. But then every restaurant that wants to go into like the Tasty Top would not be able to have gas because there isn't gas to that space at all. So there's no new hookups. But also, if like we discovered, if you have a hookup and it goes dark for a period of time, it can't be rehooked either. So we're just losing hookups regardless every time one goes dark.
1 year.
Yeah.
Jeff.
Right. So if you are a restaurant, and gas is the thing, you're out of luck entirely in the city.
Yeah, that's what I was
unless you're moving into a space that already has that hookup.
Right. Yes, I was just going to add, I think Tasty Top will be a good test case to follow. What I did hear anecdotally is that they have residential apartment buildings, and those actually can be electrified and using heat pumps. They're actually pretty efficient. So it's less those residential buildings and more those buildings up front. So like the restaurant uses that are high gas use those are really going to be the ones where we see the constraint the most. And then the hot tubs, I think they use it to fire up the hot tubs. If they have like 12 hot tubs, that's a lot of heating up of water that, that's a high demand kind of use. So I think it will be variable on the uses, but what to do with that? Like the Tasty Top people have not specifically complained about the issue. A lot of them are just they're just putting in propane as part of their projects. But, at some point that could be a problem, I guess, is what we're trying to figure out.
Well, certainly from a climate standpoint, and from let's say like the energy committee standpoint, we prefer to go through this process and sort of working to phase all that stuff out anyway. So, take away the leverage of the gas company altogether by saying, well, you know what, that's the direction we're going, which is reducing emissions, reducing, reliance on this stuff is what we want to be focusing on anyway. With all, with new development, with redevelopment, electrification is a thing. We got a lot of new infrastructure that's going to need to happen anyway, from say like an electric vehicle standpoint. Increased capacity, increased, on-site generation, all these sorts of things that are going to need to happen to be able to move to a carbon, net zero sort of equation. So, I know that doesn't necessarily help somebody that's trying to open a hot tub business tomorrow. But, from a longer timeline standpoint, it's like, that's what we'd rather be pushing anyway, is sort of, a move to electrification and renewable energy generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's okay, Gwen, I think that what Jamie's talking about is really important, because that's the planning effort that we're doing with the climate action plan. I mean, it starts with a survey and some data collection, but what we expect to get out of it is for them to help us prioritize what actions are going to be the most effective at reducing the carbon footprint. And like, that's kind of what's yet to be seen. Is it going to be getting all the vehicles electrified? Like, is that the most efficient thing and the most effective thing? Or will it be to like push new standards on development? Will that have a better, reduction? Or could it be just like the, John Q. Public homeowner putting in a heat pump? Like, that's what we don't know yet, is what's going to be the most advantageous actions for us. And that's what, that Jamie, looks like you're going to jump in, and I think that's good. But that's something to get out of the climate action plan, is a guide.
Right. And the things that the city actually has discretion over, right? They're where we actually have authority and decision-making power, because there are lots of things that are just, state, federal, out of our hands sorts of things.
Before I ask Cassie to weigh in, I'm wondering, is not really knowing what is the most impactful step to take something that we don't know, or something that we think is not known?
Well, if I can, I think it's something that we just don't know, because it's the plan is going to be tailored for Easthampton based off of what we're doing right now. Is working on our baseline data collection. So we're trying to get an idea of, what is our level of energy consumption now? Where are we consuming it? Where is it the most, heavily used? And then we can work from there to understand, like, okay, well, this thing is actually really easy to reduce the carbon usage there. Well, this one is going to be a lot harder. It's kind of like we need to see where we're at now, and then we'll be able to get a better idea where we should go. And that kind of goes in nicely with this, what I was going to say, which was that one thing that might be helpful, or one part of what we're doing right now, is trying to refine this survey that we're going to put out there. And there is a specific type of survey for business owners and people who run in the business world. And what could be helpful is that if people take that, and that should be an opportunity maybe for them to talk about, a barrier for us is switching away from gas, or, gas is really necessary for our business because, and then hopefully that information can help Weston and Sampson help us figure out, like, well, what's the best way we can help those people either switch to electric or, get what they need. At least that's my hope, at least, is that it could be used for that. And you kind of give us specific information in that way. But we were planning and trying to figure out a couple ways to try to reach businesses, because Weston and Sampson had said that in the past, it's pretty hard to hear back from businesses for the survey, but it could be really helpful. We're going to do more beyond just a survey, but that's just another piece of it that might be somewhere that we get more information specifically related to this.
Yeah,
I have a sense that we don't necessarily have a really difficult time getting business owners in Easthampton to respond to such things. But I think that it's very valuable to have a multi-pronged approach to getting their attention. And so that is one minor little thing that EDIC can certainly help support. I'm going to go to Jamie and then to Tom.
Thank you. Just going to add, to what your question and what Cassie was saying, it's not that a lot of this stuff is unknown necessarily, or sort of like best practices aren't known or can't be discovered fairly easily, but it is there are specifics here. There's a rapidly evolving landscape of this stuff too, because especially at the federal level, the state level, there's all, new guidance, there's new incentives, there's new things that are coming down the pike that are harder to communicate in real time to people, and things that are still being figured out, with the IRA and some of the other bills that have passed. There's a lot of this trickle down effect for incentives and priorities that are still being worked out in some cases. Some things have to filter through the state level where plans and programs get created. So that's all, a work in progress, and it's changing and happening so fast that it's hard for everybody to keep up. So part of this is going to be us kind of keeping up with that in real time as we're going through this, creating the plan, and also trying to probably do our best guess of like, okay, so, what does the landscape look like 2-3 years from now, 5 years from now? In terms of incentives, costs coming down. You can't predict the entire global geopolitical landscape, but there's enough that we can predict and see what to expect as far as that goes.
That's useful detail. Thanks, Tom.
I guess the only good thing is that the gas moratorium is not unique to Easthampton, so it's not like a business could say, well, I guess I'm going to open in Northampton or Holyoke instead. And I think it's probably the worst kept secret in Massachusetts. So I would assume, Jeff, when you look at a Tasty Top development, they come in knowing that they can't get natural gas. They come in knowing they've got to come up with some alternative, and they come forward anyway. So as Jeff said, that'll be a great test case to see what they do as an alternative. Some slight confusion might be with the hot tub folks. There's an existing gas line there. They might have thought that they could easily get a bigger gas line to go in, seeing that there's already one there. I guess, Cassie, back to your point about surveys or whatever, my only fear is, how do we know who doesn't decide to move their business from another town to our town? They choose not to because they can't get the gas line, so they stay where they are. A business that might be looking to expand or grow and says, wow, there's a great spot on Northampton Street. I'd love to move to Easthampton from a surrounding community, but I can't do it because I can't get gas, so I'll stay where I am. I don't know how you ever find out who they are.
Curious. David.
So I was thinking that actually might dovetail with the vacant storefront initiative of people that are seeking to find spaces in the city can sign up for a newsletter, would also be an ideal place to do that information gathering.
Interesting.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we still have time to manipulate the survey before it goes out, and maybe there's a question to the business community, like, and I think it would come through what is a barrier. If we found that a lot of businesses identified like a limited amount of gas as a barrier to expansion, I think we would be able to extrapolate that could be definitely an issue for people looking to develop a vacant parcel. That's really what we're going to see a lot of this is. We do have some vacant property. It's not a lot of vacant property left, but those vacant properties are going to be the hardest to develop for high intensity uses if they don't have access to gas, and they're going to have to just be seeking alternatives. So, Cassie, maybe we can flag that for like talking to Weston and Sampson and seeing if we can see if we're capturing that and make sure that that's like a barrier question that they could answer. We still have an opportunity, I think, to kind of put that into the survey.
Yeah, I would think they do, and I've taken notes on it, so yeah.
Awesome. I find myself curious about, this is a tangent-ish, how the Board of Public Works and some of the infrastructure maintenance that we're raising fees on water and sewer in order to pay for come into your thinking as part of the climate initiative, or if it is a conversation topic with the EAC ever. I'm really interested in the confluence of those two parts of paying to be alive in Easthampton.
Well, I guess I could say that I won't speak for the EAC. It hasn't come up a lot with our EAC projects so far that we've been talking about, but there might be some stuff in the future that maybe would make more sense. I don't think it's something that's been missed in what EAC has talked about, some of their other projects in the past, or stuff that other members are working on. For the climate action plan, I know that their plan, I thought, was to maybe do some interviews with Department of Public Works, like different departments within the city. I don't know if that would involve their board or not. I don't know, Jeff, do you have anything else related to that, or Jamie, I suppose?
The only thing I'm thinking, Gwen, is there just might be a difference where it's like not a municipal service. So water and sewer are provided as a municipal service, and there's a fee for that. But then electricity and gas come out of the other utilities. So what about I guess I would ask Jamie if like the electric light plant conversation might be part of that. We're not like Holyoke has gas and electric, their own, and South Hadley, I think, are the two municipalities that supply that service. So it might be different, but I'm stretching way out of my expertise here to wonder.
Two different directions here. I guess one is that I think a lot of that water sewer infrastructure is more covered under like resiliency plans in terms of things like climate versus straight energy. More like planning for that sort of issue, or protection against mitigation of future problems. There's an energy component to that, certainly. Those are large energy users, like all the water plants, and that from a municipal standpoint has to be accounted for in a climate action plan. So those sorts of things will be part of that. To Jeff's point about the sort of municipal light plant, one of our big projects is pushing through this municipal aggregation, which is a way for the city to aggregate, not necessarily have to own and operate like a Holyoke gas and electric sort of situation. That's something we don't want to do, because it's really onerous process and just a big headache and expense for the city to do something like that. But municipal aggregation allows us to offer additional electric choice for residents and businesses within the city, and to offer things that with higher renewable content, potentially not this is not a guarantee, but potentially at a better price point than what people can get on their own, because we're aggregating lots of users in one place. So that's a separate thing, but that is something that we are in the process of working out a contract with, and trying to push forward with over the next probably couple of years before it's all said and done.
That's cool. Great news. Love that. Thanks. Other thoughts, other questions that would further our understanding? Are there ways beyond like being good ambassadors to the business community that you can imagine the EDIC might be useful to the work of the climate action plan? It doesn't have to be now, just thinking in the future. The EAC, what are your thoughts or questions about why we exist at all and what we do?
Well, I can say, the Energy Advisory Committee has really been like the main committee, kind of providing the oversight and the kind of feedback and group work on it. But yeah, I know I really appreciate you guys being willing to help with the help at all, first of all, but then also with the kind of the main stage that we're at right now is outreach and the kind of ambassadorship element of it. I don't know when we get farther into it, in terms of trying to figure out like, okay, how to interpret this data that we've collected and things like that. There might be a place where some feedback might be helpful, but it's not 100% clear to me, really. It's really mainly been EAC so far. So I don't know, Jamie, if you have any other thoughts on that.
I think, my viewpoint is that the more collaboration we can get between city committees and those sorts of things, the better we understand what each other are doing. I think EDIC is certainly going to be valuable to help connect us with the climate action plan with the local, economic business community. They have more connections, more inroads, more, day-to-day or week-to-week experience with that. So I think that can be really useful from that standpoint. I think, with other things that we're pushing for or that we're talking about, definitely could be some ways that we could collaborate or speak about additional issues. I'm thinking about things like stretch code and even like electric vehicle adoption, because there's infrastructure that's going to pertain to businesses and new development. With something like Tasty Top is happening, they should, hopefully, I'm not well versed on the ins and outs of everything they have going on there, but like electric vehicle infrastructure is a really interesting thought with that, right? Because it's being pushed at so many levels, federal and state, and the adoption rates are really skyrocketing. So what do you need to have there? What's going to be required for something like that for the businesses that are there as well as the residents? We had a guy come to our last meeting with interesting perspective talking about was a sort of like the level 3 chargers and like, what's needed to get more of those in place. Those like the rapid, like basically going to the gas station kind of charger versus like having to let it sit there for a couple hours to get, 50 miles out of it. And that's something that we hadn't really talked about previously, but something that we're, now is on my radar to think about. How do we push that at the municipal level? Can we push that at the municipal level in some way to make that viable and to make that be sort of at the forefront of that sort of thing? Because people and businesses make location decisions based on stuff like that.
They sure do. Before I ask Jeff to weigh in, you said the phrase stretch code. What is
stretch? That? So right. So there's the building code, right? The stretch code is a higher level of energy efficiency. Easthampton currently has adopted the current stretch code, but then there's an opt-in piece as well that's even further higher efficiency required for buildings, and so that is something that the city council can push for and pass at the municipal level, so that any future development would have to meet even the higher level energy code. Jeff, you could state that a little more eloquently than I did.
No, I'm gonna skip the stretch code because I think you did fine. It's like above and beyond basically, and there's a normal and expected kind of level of that. What I was thinking about is once we get the plan in place, it's going to have action items, and I think one thing that I'm interested in following with the EDIC's role is one of my concerns is it's minor, but for businesses to make these improvements like an optionally, they're going to need to pursue some funding sources and they're going to need financial support to do that. I think the thing that we'll need to watch carefully is if we require new standards, we just have to be cognizant that businesses are going to need more money to meet those requirements. And so that's always the balance that we want to strike going forward, is making sure that if we are like with regulations going to require something that's not required in another municipality, I think that's where we want to just make sure we're balancing out future steps. So the EDIC would be important in that. The city's going to be important in this, like making sure that if there are grant funding sources available, that we're like making sure people know that they're available. And, for the municipality, our action items, that's one of the key reasons why this is really important for us to do this, is because if we have this mapped out and we have action items listed, we can go for the grants to help offset the costs. It's not clear how businesses will do that, but that'll be important for the EDIC to be aware of, is just making sure there's support for businesses to meet these new requirements if they are put in place.
Great, thanks.
Or even just making sure they know where resources are to begin with, even if we don't adopt those sorts of things, if they're interested.
Exactly. Yep.
Sorry, we'll talk over.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Tom.
Jeff, I hear what you're saying about grants, but I know way back when the city was looking at establishing incentives for homeowners to make energy improvements, insulation or heating systems or things like that, they collaborated with a local bank to create low-cost loan programs. And I'm wondering if that might be something that could be established to cover the cost of some of these optional improvements, where you collaborate with a local bank and you say, the bank says, okay, if you're going to do X, Y, and Z within these parameters, we'll give you financing at 2% as opposed to 7% or whatever it might be. But sometimes you can work that out with a local bank.
Yeah, and it's like building the system for the municipality to be helping. I think Cass said there was a heat pump program where we want to be like matchmakers. Like we can do better being matchmakers. It'll be harder, but it is possible for the city to, but like actually administer grants to help people do stuff. So yeah, those are going to be next level conversations that we'll have to help people meet these goals. Cause I think, everyone's going to be talking about it. I'm pretty happy with like Cassie's leading this really well. But like I think we're like right at the right spot in time to be creating the climate action plan so that we can come up with these action items and just be trying to harness. Jamie alluded to this, but the state in particular is going to have a lot of money flowing to municipalities to do this sort of work. And so we want to be like right there ready to receive it. And what the state wants is a plan. If you're going to be grabbing money to implement a plan action, then you're going to be in good shape. And so that's like right where we want to be.
Fabulous. We're at 4:43. Are there other things we'd like to talk about with our guests, Cassie and Jamie, before we say be free? Okay. Well, you're welcome to stick around for the latter few minutes of our meeting, but you're also welcome to go do your own thing. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I'll look forward to inviting you to some future conversations. Thanks for being here and being so informative.
Thanks for all your efforts too. Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to see you all.
Onward. Have a wonderful afternoon.
And if you guys have other questions in the future, feel free to always email me and we can go from there. But I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
I agree.
So fabulous. I will look forward to watching what's happening there. Municipal aggregation. I love that. Hooray, hooray. Choices are good. We have some old business, some nuances about some old business. So there's a city council public hearing tomorrow night about the school reuse proposal. My understanding is that at the day of our last meeting, some words were had, some of them on paper, with the school reuse committee from a different proposer. And these are things I have not paid close attention to. Is the school reuse proposal the Arch one? Is it tomorrow? Should we say something? I'm not going, but what are your thoughts? Anybody know anything?
Jeff must.
Well, I mean, I think the EDIC has been involved in this the whole time. And I think if I think the EDIC wrote a letter, right? So that was good. And I think that's important. Having someone potentially attend could be really important. This is not the final step, but it is the final step for a while, where city council has been given a recommended proposal, which is Arch Communities, as Gwen said. Their proposal is to redevelop all 3 schools. But what is unknown is whether there'll be any concerns or questions that city council has, or, making them feel like they're well supported. We've all been working really hard on this for years. This, in my professional opinion, this is a good proposal. It's really strong. So they preserve the auditorium and the gymnasium in Pepin, and they convert the front half of the building to units. Center School is converted to units, and then Maple Street is converted to units. Part of the conversations that we've had as a community is with Maple Street, that the residents in that neighborhood have been consistently saying we would like to have a community space, like a playground area, preserved. And then the business community has said we think there should be public parking also baked into the project. And so the Arch Street proposal, the developer has agreed to provide both of those as part of the Maple Street School project. And through the city council process, the biggest discussion that they had is they will vote and they send the package to the mayor. And the big question is the mayor required to maintain any of these elements, or are they all recommendations? So city council could hand this over and just give recommendations to the mayor, and then the mayor has the authority to change, to accept and negotiate different things. Or should the city council make some requirements of the mayor to maintain certain parts? And so where the property committee ended up was they recommended, so city council, what they're going to talk about tomorrow night is, do they require the gymnasium to stay available for public space? That's kind of one of the big question marks. It was recommended that the city council, it's recommended that the mayor maintain the gym through the negotiations. And then the second requirement was that at Maple Street, the mayor be required to maintain the community space kind of on the Maple Street side, and then public parking kind of facing Cottage Street. Those were the two requirements that city council was asked to give to the mayor. The rest of the, there are some other details, and they were all kind of based on recommendations. So that there's a memo that is posted on the project page. We have an elementary school reuse page. So it's the very last item, but it is the memo which captures this, that they're recommending the Arch Street proposal with two requirements: the gym and then the playground and parking at Maple, and everything else would be a recommendation. We would expect that the development doesn't change a lot, but if it's not a requirement, we could see stuff change. So, there could be some discussion or debate, or it could be perfectly fine. I do know, like, the Affordable Housing Partnership will probably be at the meeting to speak in favor of the fact that this is 95% affordable housing, which is what we have all kind of like determined is important. What we don't know is whether business communities will come out or anyone else, really. So that's kind of a crash summary of the situation right now. And then I would just want to say that this is the final stage of this part of the process. And then a developer would go through probably a couple years of permitting with the planning board, and then securing all the financing. So there's a bunch of different tax credits. There's affordable housing tax credits and historic tax credits that would all have to be gathered and approved, and then they would be constructing. So, one expectation for people is that there's probably not really going to be a shovel in the ground until like 2027. So we're at like this moment in time in 2023, and we need to pass this stage. So there is a preferred developer chosen by the city, and then they go through kind of another elongated process to get all the money that they need to do the development project itself.
That is long. Okay. All right. Good info. Chris.
I should know this, and I'm sorry, but was part of Arch's plan to take control of the buildings until then, for the next 3 or 4 years?
No, so one of the criteria in the RFP was for any developer team who proposed is to identify how long it would take. There was points given for any team that could do it within 18 months or less, and no one could do it within 18 months. So they were all longer than that. Gwen mentioned the second proposer. So they did take issue with the Arch Street proposal that was selected on a couple different points, and one was this duration, but everybody was at least 2 years to actually get all the permits and all the financing together. These guys were actually 36 months. So they were a little bit longer. And then at the end of this process, when they actually acquire the property, they would purchase it from the city for, it's like $1.2 million what the city would get. But the city would be incurring the costs during this period of time. So there would have to be some budgeted items for that. But then at the end of this process, the city would basically get recouped almost all, if not more, of those costs. It is this awkward period of time of a couple of years that the city would have to maintain the buildings at a cost. And then when the properties are transferred and sold, the city would be paid, a price.
Thank you.
Jeff, not knowing exactly what Arch is going to do within the four walls of the existing buildings, would we? And I know what happens if you don't do this, but would we have an opportunity? Would we still need to heat the buildings? Could we just let the infrastructure in the buildings go, because obviously they're not going to use the current heating systems?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten a couple of questions from people about using the buildings, and it's pretty complicated. But one example was to have public access to the buildings, you have to have annual inspections by the fire department and fire professionals. So they all have sprinkler systems, and then they have fire extinguishers, which all get inspected annually and have to be like in good repair. So the fire department allows, it's kind of like mothballing. You reduce the amount of input into the buildings to a minimum safe level. So they would have some heat in the winter because we don't want the buildings to go into full deterioration. So enough to make sure that the pipes don't freeze. But that's a minimal amount versus heating it at 70 degrees. Like if you have kids in there in the middle of winter, like that usage, there's a big difference. So we kind of go into this mothball where they're kind of minimally maintained. So the city would be, I think the expectation is the city would mothball them, which means they'd be minimally maintained in good repair, which is important for everybody. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
well, I'm not sure what you mean by who might use the buildings in the interim, but I guess when you say mothball, I was thinking I wouldn't worry about the pipes freezing if I shut the water off and drain the pipes.
Right, but then there's the sprinkler system. So I might be speaking a little bit out of my area of expertise, but I think the city is in a good. It's important for the city to maintain the sprinkler systems as being in good repair.
Yep.
Just in case something were to happen, that they are functioning, and that's important because they are these assets that it would not be good if they are not usable assets anymore. So we don't want something catastrophic to happen, I think, in this period of time.
Makes sense.
Right.
So all that said, does anyone want to volunteer to say anything tomorrow at the public hearing on behalf of EDIC? Or shall we let our letter, which said, make an expeditious decision, stand on its own? Cassie thinks no. Okay, we're not doing it then. Great. Final thing. EDIC's last meeting, we got super jazzed about senior housing as an idea. And I think previously been asked by Jenna and Jackie of the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership to have a joint meeting. We set it up for June, and I shared with them that we were thinking about senior housing, and they're like, why? That's not a focus of the housing production plan. So you can go read the housing production plan. You can find the ways in which senior housing and the need for it is represented. So it's not that it gets no attention. It's that this housing production plan prioritizes affordable housing for all groups of people, including seniors. So that is something to know, to keep in our minds for our conversation in June. Like they'll have ideas, we can ask them questions, they'll have questions for us, etc. And we can come to some greater understanding from that and then make a decision about how we'd like to move forward. It's also, I mean, we were starting to talk about zoning. There are a lot of elements of this that are still ripe for discussion. And so I don't want anybody to feel like, oh man, we got so jazzed and nobody wants that. It's not true. But we probably need to refine our approach. Questions or thoughts about that?
Could you just reiterate? I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Did you say that you're expecting the someone from the Affordable Partnership to come to your next meeting? Is that part of what you guys talked about?
We've planned to set a joint meeting.
Okay.
I think that's what we said. That's what I said. So we both should be creating agendas that are posted online for June 20th.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Tom?
Gwen, I understand the affordable housing group focusing on affordable housing, but I have to believe that the housing plan, which I'm not going to go back and read again, but focuses on all aspects of housing, whether it's apartments or seniors or everything in between.
Yep.
So I don't know I guess I understand that senior housing might be left out of the discussion with the affordable housing group, but I don't think it's left out of the conversation when we look at the housing production plan in Easthampton.
It's not left out of the discussion entirely, but it is not a feature of the primary activities and tasks in the HPP's multi-year plan. So you can Control F and look for the word senior or seniors and find the ways in which senior housing gets attention and the ways that people identified that as a definite need. And they focused in this plan on affordable housing would help us meet the needs of seniors. But it's also true, Cassie was real jazzed after our last meeting and did some research and was looking at, is it Westfield? And looking at some of their requirements for senior housing developments and comparing that to what it takes to propose housing in Easthampton. And just we made some quick conclusions about the different types of expectations we have of those kinds of developments. So there's probably something there to look at. David.
I'm just thinking back to the conversation we had maybe 6 months ago about the demographic change in the aging of our population, right? And which is what I'm assuming you guys were talking about last month. But based on what we were talking about back then, that would seem like this should be a priority for the smart growth of the city, as opposed to a lumping it in with all the others aspect. No, I mean, like,
Totally fair. So let's bring that.
If we have a shortage of stock. Yeah, I mean, if we have a shortage of stock across the board, like the only way to move it through the system is to focus on this demographic.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that we should be really, we should go to our next meeting with this belief that we all were super excited about and say, okay, we get it. And does the HPP basically represent the totality of what we're willing to invest our time and energy in as a city? Probably not. So what are some other ways that we could supplement that? But also, what if the answer is yes? I don't know. Jeff Bagg's sitting here. I don't know if he knows, but Cassie, what are your thoughts? You're muted, lady.
Excuse me. What I don't understand about this requirement to have affordable housing is I don't think there's affordable housing at Lathrop, and I don't think there's affordable housing at the stuff that's being built on Loudville. Are you telling me you just can't build anything without having affordable housing as part of it? It doesn't make sense to me.
Jeff Bagg, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'm really sad I missed that last meeting. No, Cassie, like the Loudville Road development has no affordable housing, and Ferry Street development has no affordable housing. So there's absolutely no. You don't have to build affordable housing, but we're trying to encourage that. I guess I'm coming in like blind to what you guys previously talked about, so bear with me for 1 second. But the promotion of affordable housing could serve seniors. There's no reason why a senior could not be eligible for the affordable housing. That would be the thing I would like to talk about, is that there's got to be a discussion of the different gradations of senior housing. So we used to have, I wasn't here, but we used to have a over 55 category in the zoning ordinance. It got removed, and I don't know why. Maybe Tom, you might remember, but the one thing that I would be really nervous about is that we don't necessarily need super expensive, high-end senior housing. That's not going to serve our population. Our population is older people who own a single-family home and want that next level of housing development. In a $600,000 unit is not attainable, and it's not going to be what we need. So, like, if we are talking about affordable senior housing as like a specific category and really encouraging that, we'd want to understand the differences between, what we're promoting as affordable housing and then senior housing. I might be mixing myself up here, but I just want to be careful that we really don't need that many more developments like that Loudville project, because it's not supporting seniors from Easthampton. It's people. I got a letter from someone who moved from North Carolina into those units. And so we're not going to be really serving our Easthampton population of seniors by building a lot more of that. So with that, I'll stop, because I don't know, maybe I'll go back to listen to the meeting and get more context.
Okay. Yeah. I think there are a lot of nuances to what we're thinking about. Tom?
I think, Jeff, the gradation you refer to is exactly correct. So there may be a senior who needs that affordability piece, but there's another group of seniors who their most valuable asset is their home. They have no mortgage on it. They sell their home in Easthampton for $500,000, and they want to be in this over 55 community that might cost them $300,000 or $400,000 to get into,
Right.
but they can. And the problem by us not looking at that is that now our seniors leave Easthampton, and with them there's an economic impact to that when those seniors leave Easthampton. Someone once told me even about taxes after death that are tied to the community you live in. And I don't know enough about that to speak about it, but to go back to your other point about the history, we had an over 55 ordinance in Easthampton. And at one point with the condos on East Street, we had 300 units online available, 300. And it scared the living heck out of a lot of folks at City Hall in the planning department that we had 300 units available. So they put a moratorium in on over 55. You can't build anymore. Well, maybe whatever, I don't know, maybe what, but today those units all have waiting lists. I know that for a fact that all of the condo developments on East Street have waiting lists. So sure, did it take 20 years for that to get full in a waiting list? Maybe, but we shouldn't have gotten nervous just because we had 300 coming online, just like people are getting nervous about 200 apartments on Northampton Street.
David?
One of the things I see a lot in the discussion boards anytime, whether there's an override or whatnot, is the people over 55 who have their house and are worried about rising property taxes, who want to stay in the community, that need to stay in the community, but can't because they're being priced out. And there's nowhere for them to move. There's nowhere for them to downsize to, because there's no property on the market that they can downsize to. You and I, like our neighbor, it would have been lovely if she could have downsized into a smaller place, as opposed to having to go to the city to ask for, I can't remember what it's called, but when you ask for forgiveness on your property taxes. Like, we don't want our seniors to end up in that situation where that has to be the answer, but instead have available property that is affordable senior property that has services and everything else relating to it. There's an economic benefit, because then a young family could also move into that place that's being vacated.
Yes.
So we do need to have that ability to transition people within the community, out of the house that they can no longer afford or it's too big or whatnot, into a place that's still within the community where they have roots and they have connections, but also welcome in new families.
Yes.
So, I think there really does need to be a specific call out for affordable senior housing. as a specific category of affordable housing.
Yeah, and this is a conversation that we've had repeatedly over the years, and this was a continuation. It can be a little more formal next month with the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. It's not just about it being an economically correct choice. That's an emotional demonstration of care for elders in our community, to be able to enable them to stay in their community and be part of their social network that's in some cases taken them decades to build, and not basically ensure that their longer term outcomes are worse because they're detached from their social network. So there are a lot about that too. Jeff, do you want to have a closing statement, and then we got to get out of here? I am fading real fast.
Yeah, you did great. I know you're not feeling well. I just would say my understanding right now of our zoning is we do not prohibit the development of senior housing. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that if someone wanted to, they could. It's not like they can't. And I would say that I've been learning a lot. I've learned a lot. I kind of been sitting in this position for 6 years now, actually, believe it or not, that the market will dictate what gets developed. Like we can do the best we can to put out clarity on what we want to see, but if it's not going to be financially feasible, or if there's not economic benefits along the way with tax credits or whatever, like we may not get it unless the market is really driving it. So but we want to, I guess, be clear on promoting it as a need. Like that may be where we are falling short. So this really like makes me feel like we should do some kind of planning study and like get another consultant in here to help refine these target items, because I think we're probably not going to be able to flesh this all out on our own. But so, that may sound really boring to everybody, but that might be how we really flesh this out, is make sure that we're doing it the right way and look at the whole market context of everything. But I think with that, I'll stop, and thanks for hearing me out.
Okay, Tom.
Jeff, you're absolutely right on the market driving this. I mean, I go to the Cape fairly regularly. They are building these over 55 units on every street corner, because guess what? A lot of people are retiring to the Cape. So they're building it because the market's driving it. You're absolutely right. And I don't know how we find out if there's enough, to Dave's point, if there's enough seniors out there that are looking for these. But last time I checked, Lathrop was full. So I almost think it's, if you build it, they will come.
I think we also have some existing data sources regionally and in our town that could inform some of this. So I think there's a little relatively recent research to do on existing studies and pull together some of those, and that could offer some nuance to any future work we might want to solicit. Thank you all for your brains and time. I'm going to go to bed now. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. I will see you on June 20th. Thank you. Anybody want to close this meeting?
I move to close the meeting.
Great. Cassie, you want to second it?
Sure.
All in favor? Let's get out of here.
Yay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.